The crack of a single gunshot pierced the morning air of Willow Creek as Genevieve Owens stood shivering at her family's property line, her father's words still ringing in her ears. "You're dead to us now. Your name shall never again be spoken in this house." Blood trickled down her palm where she'd gripped the iron fence too tightly, watching as her brother tore her name from the family Bible and burned the page before her eyes. It was 1878, and at 22 years old, Genevieve had just become a ghost in her own hometown, all because she'd refused to marry the wealthy banker her father had chosen, a man 40 years her senior with a reputation for burying 3 wives already. The gunshot came again, closer this time. Genevieve jumped, clutching her small carpet bag containing all she'd been allowed to take. One dress besides the one she wore, a hairbrush that had belonged to her grandmother, and $16 she'd saved from selling her embroidery in secret. Her honey-brown hair, normally pinned in a proper bun, tumbled around her shoulders, having come loose in her hasty departure. "Easy there," came a low voice from behind her. "Just shooting at her, Rattler." Genevieve spun around to find herself face to face with a tall figure silhouetted against the rising sun. Rider Quinn tipped his hat back, revealing eyes the color of a summer storm gray with hints of blue. At 26, he was the most skilled horse trainer in 3 counties, and the man her father despised most for refusing to sell him his prized stallion last spring. "Miss Owens," he said with a nod, then noticed her bag and reddened eyes. "Trouble at home," Genevieve laughed bitterly. "I no longer have a home, Mr. Quinn, and according to my father, I no longer have a name either." Ryder's expression darkened. He holstered his pistol and stepped closer, his spurs jingling softly against the morning quiet. "What happened?" "I refused to marry Walter Prescott." She lifted her chin, though her voice trembled. "Father said a disobedient daughter is no daughter at all. They've struck my name from the family Bible and forbidden anyone to speak it again." Ryder whistled low. "Old man Prescott, he's got to be 62, Genevieve confirmed. "And looking for wife number 4 since Margaret passed last winter." "Where will you go?" The question hung in the air as reality crashed over her. She had no answer, no plan beyond walking away with her dignity intact. "I don't know." Ryder studied her for a long moment, then turned and whistled. From the copse of trees nearby, a magnificent black stallion trotted forward. "This is Midnight," he said, patting the horse's neck. "The very beast your father tried to buy." Seems you both had the good sense to refuse Clayton Owens what he wanted. Despite everything, Genevieve smiled. "He is beautiful. He's also our ticket out of here if you're willing." Ryder extended his hand. "I'm heading to my ranch outside Silver Creek. It's a 3-day ride, but you'd have work and a roof over your head while you figure things out." Genevieve stared at his outstretched hand. "People will talk. People always talk." His eyes met her steadily. "But a woman without a name has nothing left to lose, does she?" With her heart pounding, Genevieve took his hand. "Nothing at all, Mr. Quinn." In one fluid motion, Ryder lifted her onto the saddle, then swung up behind her. "Then we ride west, miss," he paused. "What shall I call you if your family has erased your name?" Genevieve looked back one last time at the grand white house where she'd grown up, where even now the servants would be removing her portrait from above the fireplace. "Just Genevieve, that's all I have left." "Then I'll call you Genevieve," Ryder said softly. "And one day, I promise you, your name will mean something again." As they rode away from Willow Creek, Genevieve felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. It might have been freedom, or it might have been fear. But pressed against Rider Quinn's solid chest as they galloped west into the unknown, she found she didn't care which it was. The first night on the trail, they made camp beneath a canopy of stars unlike any Genevieve had ever seen. Growing up in the Owens mansion with its gas lamps always burning meant she'd rarely experienced true darkness. Now, spread above her like spilled diamonds on black velvet, the night sky took her breath away. "First time sleeping rough?" Ryder asked, stoking the small fire he'd built after setting up a simple camp. They'd ridden hard all day, stopping only to water Midnight and eat a quick lunch of jerky and dried apples from Ryder's saddlebags. Genevieve nodded, wincing as she stretched her legs. The day's ride had left her muscles screaming in protest. "Is it that obvious? Only in the way you keep looking at everything like you've never seen it before. Ryder handed her a tin cup of coffee, strong and black. City girl through and through. Willow Creek is hardly a city, she countered, taking a cautious sip and barely hiding her grimace at the bitter taste. Ryder chuckled. Compared to where we're headed, it might as well be New York. He settled across the fire from her, his features dancing in the flickering light. Silver Creek's just a handful of buildings, and my ranch is another hour's ride beyond that. What's it like? Your ranch, small compared to what you're used to, Ryder said. 200 acres, a decent house I built myself, barn, corral. Got about 30 horses, mostly wild ones I've tamed for selling. It's not much, but it's mine. No debts, no partners. Genevieve wrapped her fingers around the warm cup. It sounds wonderful. Your father never mentioned me, Ryder asked after a moment. Oh, he mentioned you. Genevieve couldn't help but smile. Usually with a string of curses attached, the man who refused Clayton Owens became something of a legend in our house. Father isn't used to hearing no. Neither is Prescott, Ryder said darkly. What was your father thinking, promising you to a man like that? Genevieve stared into the fire. The bank, father's railroad investments went bad last year. He's been borrowing heavily from Prescott to keep up appearances. So you were to be the payment, Ryder concluded, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, a fair trade in his eyes. His daughter for financial security. She looked up at him. But I couldn't do it, not after what happened to Prescott's last wives. Ryder leaned forward. What do you mean, 3 wives, all dead within 5 years of marriage? The first fell down the stairs, the second drowned in the bath, and the third, Margaret, supposedly died of fever, though the doctor found bruises on her neck. Genevieve shuddered. Nothing could be proven, of course. Prescott owns half the town, including the sheriff. And your father still expected you to marry him. Ryder's knuckles went white around the handle of his coffee cup. He said I was being ridiculous. That accidents happen and Margaret's bruises came from her coughing fits. Genevieve's voice dropped to a whisper. When I refused, he slapped me. Said I'd do as I was told or be cut off without a penny. So you chose freedom. I chose life, she corrected. I believe Walter Prescott murdered his wives and I wasn't going to be number 4. Ryder was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a worn leather-bound book. Can you read? Genevieve nodded. I had tutors until I was 18. Then you can help me keep my accounts when we reach the ranch. He opened the book, showing columns of figures. I'm no good with numbers. Used to have a fellow come out from Silver Creek once a month to help, but he moved on last spring. You're offering me a job? Genevieve asked, surprised. Room, board, and wages, Ryder confirmed. I need the help and you need somewhere to land on your feet. Seems fair to me. It was more than fair and they both knew it. Thank you, she said softly. Ryder nodded, then stood up. Get some sleep. I'll take first watch. Watch, for what? His expression turned serious. We're in open country now, coyotes, wolves, the occasional drifter. And if your father's half as upset as I think he is, he might have sent men after us. The thought hadn't occurred to her. Would he do that? A man who strikes his daughter's name from the family Bible isn't thinking clearly, Ryder said grimly. And Clayton Owens has always considered his possessions worth protecting. Genevieve felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. I'm not his possession. No, Ryder agreed, checking his pistol before settling against a nearby tree with a clear view of their surroundings. But men like your father and Prescott don't understand the difference between owning things and owning people. As she curled up in the blanket Ryder had provided, Genevieve realized how right he was. All her life, she'd been a chess piece in her father's game, a valuable commodity to be traded for social advancement or financial gain. Never once had he asked what she wanted. Ryder, she said softly, just before sleep claimed her. Why did you help me? You could have ridden past. In the dim firelight, she saw him smile, a gentle expression at odds with his weathered face. Let's just say I understand what it means to want to write your own story. As Genevieve drifted into an exhausted sleep, she wondered what story lay behind those words and what chapters might lie ahead for both of them. The second day of travel brought blistering heat and the constant threat of a brewing storm on the horizon. Genevieve's fair skin, unused to such exposure, had begun to redden despite the bonnet Ryder had fashioned for her from a spare shirt. Her muscles ached from the unfamiliar motion of riding, but she refused to complain. This discomfort was the price of her freedom, and she would pay it gladly. Around midday, they crested a hill to find a small trading post nestled in a grove of cottonwoods beside a creek. The weathered sign read, "Miller's Station." "We can rest here a while," Ryder said, guiding Midnight toward the hitching post. "Get something hot to eat, maybe find you some proper riding clothes." Genevieve glanced down at her impractical dress, now dirty and torn at the hem. "I have very little money." "Consider it an advance on your wages," Ryder replied, helping her down from the saddle. Her legs nearly buckled as she stood, and he caught her elbow to steady her. "Easy there." The touch of his hand sent an unexpected warmth through her, and Genevieve quickly stepped away, flustered. "I'm fine, thank you." The interior of the trading post was cramped but well stocked, with shelves of canned goods, tools, ammunition, and dry goods. Behind a small counter, a bearded man in a stained apron looked up from his newspaper. "Rider Quinn," the man said with a toothy grin. "Been a while." "Ezra," Ryder nodded. "This is Miss Genevieve. She's coming to work at my ranch." Ezra Miller's bushy eyebrows shot up as he gave Genevieve a curious once-over. Her cheeks burned under the scrutiny. "We need some supplies," Ryder continued, seemingly oblivious to the older man's questioning look. "Got any women's riding clothes? Boots her size?" While Ryder listed their needs, Genevieve wandered toward the back of the store where a small shelf held several books. Her fingers trailed over the spines, pausing on a well-worn copy of Jane Eyre. Books had been her escape at home, her secret friends when her father deemed her too old for such frivolous pastimes. "You like to read," Ezra called over, noting her interest. "Very much," she admitted. "Take it," the old man said with a wave. "Got it in trade last year." "Nobody out here has time for such things." Genevieve carefully took the book, holding it to her chest. "Thank you." While Ryder settled their bill, she slipped into the small back room to change into the clothes. Ezra had found a pair of men's trousers that were too short but could be cinched at the waist, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest that had belonged to Ezra's late wife. The boots were a passable fit if a bit worn at the heels. When she emerged, both men stopped talking abruptly. Ryder stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "What?" Genevieve asked, suddenly self-conscious. "I know it's not proper, but it's practical," Ryder cut in. "And where we're going, practical matters more than proper." Outside, as Ryder secured their new supplies to Midnight's saddle, Ezra pulled Genevieve aside. "Girl, I don't know what you're running from, but you should know there's talk." Her stomach clenched. "What talk?" "Riders came through this morning. Said Clayton Owens is offering $500 for the return of his daughter and the head of the horse thief who took her." Genevieve gasped. "Horse thief? I went willingly. And I'm 22 years old, not a child to be returned anywhere." "Don't matter to bounty hunters," Ezra said gravely. $500 is $500, and some might figure they only need to bring you back alive, not him." Before she could respond, Ryder approached. "We should get moving. Storm's coming in faster than I thought." Ezra gave him a meaningful look. "Was just telling the lady about those riders looking for Owen's daughter." Ryder's jaw tightened. "How many?" "3. Mean-looking bunch. Said they'd be checking all the trails and stations heading west." With a curt nod, Ryder turned to Genevieve. "Change of plans. We're going north first, then cutting west. Longer route, but less traveled." The gravity of the situation settled over Genevieve like a stone. "This is my fault. I've put you in danger." "You've done nothing wrong," Ryder said firmly. "Your father's the one with blood on his hands, sending gunmen after his own daughter." "Not just after me," she reminded him. "He wants you dead." Ryder's mouth quirked into a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Wouldn't be the first time someone's wanted that. Let's go." As they mounted up, Ezra pressed a small package into Genevieve's hands. "Bread and cheese, and this." He slipped a small knife into the package. "Girl traveling these parts should have protection." "Thank you," she whispered, touched by the kindness of this stranger. They rode hard for the next few hours, veering north as the storm clouds gathered. The first fat raindrops began to fall just as Ryder pointed to a rocky outcropping ahead. "Old mining cabin up there," he shouted over the rising wind. "We can wait out the storm." The cabin was little more than a shack, one room with a dirt floor, a rusted stove, and a sagging cot in the corner. But it was dry, and the thick stone walls blocked the howling wind that had picked up as they'd dismounted. Ryder led Midnight into the cabin with them. "Too valuable to leave outside," he explained, removing the saddle and their supplies. "And he'll help keep us warm." The storm hit with full force just as Ryder got a small fire going in the stove. Rain hammered against the single dirty window, and thunder shook the walls. Genevieve huddled near the stove, her wet clothes clinging uncomfortably to her skin. "Here," Ryder said, tossing her a dry blanket from his pack. "Get those wet things off before you catch your death." Genevieve clutched the blanket, looking pointedly around the one-room cabin. "Turn around." Ryder chuckled and obediently faced the wall. City girl indeed. As she quickly changed, wrapping the rough wool blanket around herself, Genevieve found herself studying the broad expanse of Ryder's shoulders, the way his damp shirt clung to the muscles of his back. She'd never been alone with a man like this, never been allowed to be. The impropriety of their situation would have scandalized Willow Creek society. Yet here, with rain lashing the cabin and thunder rolling overhead, such concerns seemed as distant as the life she'd left behind. "Decent now," she announced, settling back by the stove with her wet clothes spread nearby to dry. Ryder turned, his own blanket draped over his shoulders, his dark hair curling damply around his face. "Hungry?" he asked, pulling out Ezra's package of bread and cheese along with his own supplies. They ate in companionable silence, listening to the storm rage outside. "Will they follow us in this weather?" Genevieve finally asked, voicing the fear that had been growing since they'd left the trading post. Ryder considered the question. "Not likely. Even bounty hunters have sense enough to seek shelter in a storm like this, but they'll pick up our trail once it passes." "I'm sorry," she said again. "I never meant to bring this trouble to you." "Stop apologizing," Ryder said firmly. "You're not responsible for your father's actions." Genevieve hugged her knees to her chest. "What will happen when we reach Silver Creek? We'll need to be careful. Word travels, and $500 is enough to turn an honest man dishonest." Ryder stoked the fire, sending sparks up the chimney. "But I've got friends there. People who owe me favors. And at your ranch, that's my land, my rules." His voice hardened. "Anyone who comes looking for trouble there will find more than they bargained for." The fierce protectiveness in his tone made Genevieve's heart skip. No one had ever stood up for her like this before. "Why are you doing all this for me, Ryder? The truth this time." Ryder was quiet so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he sighed. "I had a sister once, Elizabeth. She was 16 when our parents died. I was 20, working as a ranch hand, saving to buy my own place." Genevieve watched his face carefully, seeing pain etched in the lines around his eyes. "I couldn't take her with me, had no proper place for her to live, so I sent her to live with our aunt in Denver." His voice grew tight. "The aunt married her off 6 months later to a man 30 years her senior. Rich fellow, respected in the community." "What happened to her?" Genevieve asked softly, though she feared she already knew. "She wrote to me once, begging me to come get her. Said he was cruel, that he hurt her." Ryder's knuckles went white as he clenched his fists. "I set out the next day, but I was too late. They said she fell from a balcony. An accident just like Prescott's wives." "Oh, Ryder," Genevieve whispered, her heart breaking for him. "I tried to get justice, but who listens to a nobody ranch hand against a wealthy businessman?" Bitterness seeped into his words. "So I left Denver, worked every job I could find, saved every penny until I had enough for my own place. Made a vow that I'd never again stand by while someone helpless was traded like cattle." Thunder crashed outside, underlining his words. "So when I saw you standing there with your little bag, looking like the world had ended." He finally met her eyes. "I saw Elizabeth, and I couldn't ride past, not this time." Without thinking, Genevieve moved to sit beside him, taking his rough hand in hers. "I'm so sorry about your sister." "It was 6 years ago now." He didn't pull his hand away. "But when you told me about Prescott and his wives, I knew I'd made the right choice, helping you." They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sounds the crackling fire and the rain beating against the cabin. Genevieve was acutely aware of the warmth of his hand in hers, the way his breathing had steadied, the closeness of his body next to hers. "We should try to get some sleep," Ryder finally said, his voice rough. "Storm's not letting up anytime soon, and we've got hard riding ahead once it does." Genevieve nodded, reluctantly releasing his hand. "You take the cot, I'll sleep here by the stove." "Not a chance," he countered. "You take the cot, I've slept on worse than a dirt floor." Too exhausted to argue, Genevieve moved to the rickety cot, wrapping the blanket tightly around herself. As she drifted toward sleep, she heard Ryder softly speaking to Midnight, his low voice as soothing as a lullaby. "Rest easy," she thought she heard him whisper. "I won't let them take her back, not while there's breath in my body." Whether he was speaking to the horse or to himself, Genevieve couldn't be sure. But the words followed her into dreams where she rode endlessly toward a horizon that kept receding, her name written in stars above a home she couldn't quite see. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean world and skies of perfect blue. They set out at dawn, Ryder leading them through terrain so rugged Genevieve wondered how he navigated it. When she asked, he tapped his temple with a smile. "Got a map up here. Been riding these parts since I was 14. "Tell me about your ranch," she requested, as they picked their way along a narrow ridge that offered breathtaking views of the valley below. "What's it like day to day?" Ryder seemed pleased by her interest. "Up before sunrise usually. Check the horses, mend whatever needs mending. I break the wild ones gentle enough to sell, that's my main business. Got a small vegetable garden, few chickens for eggs, simple living." "It sounds wonderful," Genevieve said sincerely. "Lonely sometimes," he admitted, surprising her with his candor. "Nearest neighbors 5 miles away, town's not much for socializing unless you like saloons." "I could learn to garden," she offered, "and cook, though I must warn you I've never done much of either." Ryder chuckled. "Can't be worse than my cooking. Been living on beans and biscuits so long I've forgotten what real food tastes like." As the day progressed, they fell into an easy rhythm, taking turns telling stories of their lives. Genevieve described the stifling existence of a wealthy man's daughter, the endless lessons in deportment, the restricted movements, the expectation that her only ambition should be a suitable marriage. "Sounds like a pretty cage," Ryder observed. "Exactly," she agreed. "A gilded cage is still a cage." Ryder shared tales of his own youth working cattle drives as a boy, learning to break horses from a Comanche horse trainer who'd taken him under his wing, saving for years to buy his land. "How did you end up with Midnight?" Genevieve asked, patting the stallion's sleek neck. Ryder's expression grew distant. "Found him trapped in a canyon 3 years back. Some Mustang hunters had been chasing the herd and they'd fallen through a weak spot in the trail. The rest died in the fall, but he survived with just a broken leg. You nursed him back to health. Took 6 months before he could even bear weight on it. Another year before I could ride him. Most would have put a bullet in him, but..." Ryder shrugged. Something in his eyes wasn't ready to give up. By late afternoon, they reached a wider trail that Ryder explained would take them west towards Silver Creek. "We'll make camp early tonight," he decided. "Give Midnight a proper rest. He's been carrying double for 3 days now." They found a spot near a small spring, sheltered by a cluster of pine trees. While Ryder tended to Midnight, Genevieve gathered wood for a fire, pleased to be able to contribute something useful. The domestic scene they created, Ryder preparing a simple meal while Genevieve set out their bedrolls, felt surprisingly comfortable, as if they'd been traveling together for years rather than days. As twilight descended, Ryder suddenly went still, his hand moving to his pistol. "Don't move," he whispered to Genevieve. She froze, heart pounding. "What is it?" "Riders, 3 of them coming up from the south." He moved swiftly, dousing their small fire with dirt. "Could be nothing, but I'm not taking chances." In the fading light, Genevieve could just make out the distant figures approaching. "The bounty hunters, maybe." Ryder quickly repacked their supplies. "We need to move, now." They mounted Midnight in seconds, all weariness forgotten in the rush of fear. Ryder guided them into the deepening shadows of the pines, away from the trail. For what felt like hours, they moved carefully through the darkness, pausing occasionally for Ryder to listen for pursuers. Finally, when the moon had risen high overhead, he deemed it safe to stop. "Lost them, I think," he said, helping Genevieve down from the saddle. Her legs trembled as much from fear as from exhaustion. "We can't keep running forever," she said, voicing the thought that had been troubling her. "Sooner or later they'll catch up." Ryder's expression was grim in the moonlight. "Then we need to reach my ranch before they do. We'll ride through the night." "Is it much farther?" "Another day and a half, the route we're taking." He handed her a canteen. "Drink, it's going to be a long night." As they rode under the star-studded sky, Genevieve found herself pressed close against Ryder's chest, his arms around her as he held the reins. Despite their dire circumstances, she felt a strange sense of peace in his embrace. This man, who had every reason to leave her to her fate, instead risked everything to protect her. "Ryder," she said softly after they'd been traveling in silence for some time. "If they catch us, they won't," he interrupted firmly. "But if they do," she persisted, "I want you to let them take me. Don't fight them." His arms tightened around her. "That's not going to happen. Please," she turned slightly to look up at him, their faces close in the darkness. "I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me." "Not after Elizabeth." Ryder reined Midnight to a stop, his expression fierce in the moonlight. "Listen to me, Genevieve. I'm not losing anyone else to men like your father and Prescott. Whatever comes, we face it together." The intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. "Why do you care so much what happens to me? You barely know me." For a moment, she thought he might not answer. Then, so softly she almost missed it, he said, "I'm starting to think that's not entirely true." Before she could respond, he urged Midnight forward again, leaving Genevieve to wonder at his words and the warmth that bloomed in her chest at hearing them. They rode through the night, stopping only briefly to rest Midnight and stretch their cramped limbs. Dawn found them crossing a shallow river, the water glinting gold in the first rays of sunlight. Beyond it stretched rolling grasslands that seemed to go on forever. "My land starts about 10 miles that way," Ryder said, pointing west. "Once we cross Rattlesnake Ridge, we'll be able to see the ranch." The prospect of safety gave them renewed energy. They made good time through the morning, pausing at noon beneath the shade of a lone cottonwood tree. While Midnight grazed nearby, they shared the last of their provisions: jerky, hardtack, and a few dried apples. "What will you do once we reach your ranch?" Ryder asked unexpectedly. "Long term, I mean." Genevieve considered the question. No one had ever asked about her plans before. It had always been assumed her life would follow the prescribed path of marriage and motherhood. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Work for you as we discussed, at least until I can save enough to do something else." "Such as?" She hesitated, then decided to share the dream she'd never voiced aloud. "I'd like to open a small school someday. I've always loved teaching. Used to help the housekeeper's children with their letters and numbers in secret." Ryder nodded thoughtfully. "Silver Creek has no proper school. Nearest one's 20 miles away. Lot of ranch families can't spare their children for that kind of travel." Hope stirred in her chest. "Do you think there would be interest?" "I know there would be," he said with certainty. "My foreman, Henry, has 3 young ones who can barely write their names. And the Wilkinsons on the next property have 5. For the first time, Genevieve allowed herself to imagine a future of her own, making not as Genevieve Owens, disgraced daughter, but as a woman with purpose and respect. The possibility was as intoxicating as it was terrifying. "It's a fine dream," Ryder said, his voice gentle, "and one worth pursuing." They were preparing to set off again when Midnight suddenly lifted his head, ears pricked forward in alert. Ryder was instantly on guard, scanning the horizon. "Riders coming fast from the east," he said tersely. 5 of them." Genevieve's blood ran cold. 5? There were only 3 before. Must have picked up reinforcements. Ryder quickly helped her mount, then swung up behind her. "We make for the ridge. If we can reach my land, we stand a better chance." They galloped across the open grassland, Midnight stretching out in a full run that ate up the distance. But the pursuing riders were gaining, their fresh horses no match for Midnight's exhausted state after days of hard travel carrying double. "They're going to catch us," Genevieve said, her voice tight with fear. Ryder's response was to push Midnight harder, aiming for a rocky outcropping ahead. "Just a little farther," he urged the stallion. They had just reached the base of the outcropping when a shot rang out, the bullet kicking up dirt just beside Midnight's hooves. The stallion reared in surprise, nearly unseating them both. "Into the rocks," Rider commanded, dismounting and pulling Genevieve down with him. "Take Midnight and go ahead, I'll hold them off." "No," Genevieve grabbed his arm. "I told you I won't let you risk your life for me." Another shot ricocheted off the rocks nearby. Rider pushed her behind a large boulder, his expression unyielding. "This isn't a debate, Genevieve. That ridge up there marks the edge of my property. Follow it west and you'll see the house within an hour." "I'm not leaving you," she insisted, tears springing to her eyes. Rider's face softened for a moment. He reached out to touch her cheek, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle. "Stubborn woman," he murmured. Then he was all business again, checking his pistol and the rifle he'd pulled from Midnight's saddle. "Stay low and follow me. We'll try to reach that stand of trees up the slope." They scrambled up the rocky incline, leading Midnight carefully over the uneven ground. The gunfire had stopped, but Genevieve could hear the shouts of their pursuers as they dismounted to follow on foot. "They're spreading out to surround us," Rider observed grimly. "Clever bastards." They had almost reached the trees when a man appeared suddenly from behind a boulder, pistol aimed directly at them. "That's far enough, Quinn," he called. Rider pushed Genevieve behind him, his own gun leveled at the stranger. "This doesn't concern you, Jenkins. Go back to Owens and tell him his daughter made her choice." The man, Jenkins, sneered. $500 concerns me plenty. Now hand over the girl and maybe I won't put a bullet in you." "Not going to happen," Rider said calmly, though Genevieve could feel the tension in every line of his body. Jenkins cocked his pistol. "Your funeral, Quinn." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Jenkins fired, the shot going wide as Midnight suddenly reared up between them, screaming his challenge. Rider returned fire, catching Jenkins in the shoulder and sending him tumbling back down the slope. "Run," Rider shouted, grabbing Genevieve's hand and pulling her toward the trees as more shots rang out behind them. They crashed through the underbrush, Midnight following close behind. Genevieve's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. The sound of pursuit grew louder, men shouting, branches breaking. Then, suddenly, Rider stopped so abruptly that Genevieve collided with his back. "Look," he said, pointing ahead. Through a break in the trees, she could see a valley spread out below them and nestled within it, a small house with smoke curling from its chimney, a barn, corrals with horses milling about, and fields of wheat rippling in the afternoon breeze. "My ranch," Rider said, a note of pride in his voice. "We made it." Before Genevieve could respond, a shot splintered the tree trunk beside her head. She ducked instinctively as Rider returned fire. "Go," he urged, pressing Midnight's reins into her hand. "Get to the house. Henry will be there, tell him what's happening." "Not without you," she insisted. The determination in her voice must have convinced him argument was pointless. "Together then," he conceded, "but we need to move fast." They half ran, half slid down the slope toward the valley, using the trees for cover as much as possible. Behind them, the pursuers were closing in, bullets occasionally whizzing past them into the foliage. As they broke free of the tree line, Rider whistled a sharp, piercing sound that carried across the valley. Almost immediately, an answering whistle came from the direction of the barn. "Henry," Rider explained, urging Genevieve forward. "He knows something's wrong." They were halfway across the open field when riders emerged from the barn, 3 men on horseback, rifles ready. The sight of reinforcements gave Genevieve new strength as they pushed on toward safety. One of the bounty hunters broke from the trees behind them, taking aim at Rider's back. Without thinking, Genevieve shoved him aside, the bullet grazing her arm instead. Pain seared through her, but she kept moving, dimly aware of Rider's alarmed shout and the thundering hooves of Henry and the others as they rode to intercept their attackers. The world narrowed to the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other, Rider's arm around her waist supporting her as her strength began to fade. The house grew larger before them, its door standing open like a promise of sanctuary. "Almost there," Rider encouraged her. "Just a little further." They stumbled up the porch steps just as gunfire erupted behind them, Henry and his men engaging the bounty hunters. Rider pulled her inside, Kicking the door shut behind them, Genevieve's legs finally gave way as relief washed over her. Ryder caught her before she hit the floor, lifting her easily into his arms. "You're hurt," he said, his voice tight with concern as he carried her to a worn sofa near the fireplace. "It's just a scratch," she insisted, though the pain in her arm suggested otherwise. Ryder ignored her protest, carefully examining the wound. "Bullet grazed you, deep but clean." He moved swiftly to a cabinet, retrieving bandages and a bottle of whiskey. "This will hurt," he warned. Genevieve bit her lip to keep from crying out as he cleaned the wound with whiskey, then bandaged it tightly. Outside, the gunfire had stopped, replaced by shouting voices that gradually grew more distant. "They're leaving," Ryder observed, moving to the window to look out. Henry and the boys must have convinced them this wasn't worth dying for. Or worth killing for, Genevieve added softly. Ryder turned back to her, his expression grave. "They'll be back. Men like Jenkins don't give up on $500 easily. What will we do? For now, rest." He sat beside her on the sofa, exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders. "Tomorrow, I'll ride into Silver Creek, speak to the sheriff, make it official that you're here of your own free will." Genevieve nodded, then winced as the movement sent a fresh wave of pain through her arm. "Ryder, I need to tell you something." His gray eyes met hers, questioning. "When that man aimed at you," she swallowed hard. "I didn't think. I just knew I couldn't let him hurt you, not after everything you've done for me." "You took a bullet for me," Ryder said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "No one's ever." He trailed off, shaking his head. "You would have done the same for me," she said simply. "Yes," he agreed. "I would have." The intensity of his gaze made her heart flutter. For a moment, she thought he might say more, might put into words the something that had been growing between them these past days. Instead, he stood up, clearing his throat. "You should rest. I'll show you to your room." Disappointed but understanding his restraint, Genevieve allowed him to help her up. As he guided her through the small but tidy house, she felt a strange sense of homecoming, as if some part of her recognized this place as where she belonged. The room he led her to was simple: a bed with a patchwork quilt, a small dresser, a window overlooking the corrals. "It's not much," Ryder said apologetically. "It's perfect," Genevieve assured him, meaning it completely. After days on the run, the prospect of a real bed and safety was beyond luxury. "Get some sleep," he said, lingering in the doorway. "We're safe now." As he turned to leave, Genevieve called after him. "Ryder," he paused, looking back. "Thank you, not just for saving me, but for seeing me." Really seeing me? Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes, a curve of his mouth that wasn't quite a smile but held more warmth than any smile she'd ever seen directed at her. "Rest now, Genevieve," he said softly. "Tomorrow begins your new life." As she settled onto the bed, too exhausted to even remove her boots, Genevieve realized that while her family had erased her name, Rider Quinn had done something much more powerful. He had seen her true self and valued it. And in doing so, he had given her something she'd never truly had before: freedom to become whoever she chose to be. The first rays of dawn streamed through the window when Genevieve awoke, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the previous days came rushing back: her disownment, the desperate journey, the shootout. She sat up gingerly, wincing at the pain in her arm and the general soreness of her body. A soft knock at the door preceded the entrance of a matronly woman with iron gray hair and kind eyes. "Good morning, miss," she said, carrying a tray with coffee and what smelled like fresh biscuits. "I'm Martha, Henry's wife. Mr. Quinn asked me to look in on you." "That's very kind, thank you," Genevieve said, accepting the tray gratefully. "Is Ryder Mr. Quinn around?" Martha's eyes twinkled. "Been up since before dawn, that one. Tending to midnight, checking the property, giving orders like a general preparing for battle," she chuckled. "Never seen him so worked up, and I've known that boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper." Genevieve sipped the coffee, savoring the rich flavor far better than the camp coffee Ryder had made. "Has there been any sign of the men who chased us?" Martha's expression sobered. "Not yet, but Henry's got the hands keeping watch." Mr. Quinn rode into Silver Creek at first light to speak with Sheriff Davis. She bustled around the room, opening curtains wider to let in more light. Found you some proper clothes, too. They belonged to Henry's daughter before she married and moved to California. Should fit well enough. Genevieve was touched by the consideration. Thank you, Martha, for all of this. No need for thanks. The older woman's face softened. Mr. Quinn explained some of what happened. Any father who'd sell his daughter to a known brute deserves a special place in hell, if you'll pardon my plain speaking. No pardon necessary, Genevieve assured her. I quite agree. After eating and changing into the simple but clean dress Martha had provided, Genevieve ventured out to explore her new surroundings. The ranch house was modest but well built, with a large kitchen, a comfortable sitting room with bookshelves lining one wall, and what appeared to be Ryder's office, a small room with a desk covered in papers and ledgers. Outside, the autumn air was crisp and clean, carrying the scents of hay, horses, and fresh turned earth. The barn stood about 50 yards from the house, with corrals extending beyond it. In one of these, a young man was working with a spirited pinto, using techniques Genevieve recognized from watching Rider with Midnight. That's Timothy, one of our hands, Martha explained, joining Genevieve on the porch. He's learning the horse-breaking trade from Mr. Quinn. Got a real gift for it. The ranch seems larger than Rider described, Genevieve observed, grown some in the last year. Mr. Quinn bought the adjoining property when old man Wilson decided to move back east. Martha pointed to fields beyond the corrals. Got wheat and corn now, not just horses. Man's building something to last. The pride in Martha's voice was evident, and Genevieve found herself wondering what it would be like to be part of this place permanently, not just as an employee, but as someone who belonged here. The thought both thrilled and frightened her. Come on, Martha said, breaking into her thoughts. Let me show you around properly. If you're going to be keeping Mr. Quinn's accounts, you'll need to know what's what. The tour took most of the morning. Martha introduced Genevieve to the ranch hand's 6 men in total, including Henry, Martha's husband and Ryder's foreman. All were respectful, if curious about her presence. By midday, Genevieve had a much clearer picture of the operation Rider had built, impressive for a man still in his 20s, who'd started with nothing. They were returning to the house for lunch when hoofbeats announced Rider's return. Genevieve's heart quickened at the sight of him riding through the gate, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the clear blue sky. He spotted her immediately, his face lighting up in a way that made her breath catch. Sheriff Davis is riding out this afternoon, he announced as he dismounted. Wants to talk to you himself, get a sworn statement that you left Willow Creek of your own accord. Will that be enough? Genevieve asked. Ryder's expression was grim. Should be. Davis is an honest man, but your father has money and influence even this far out. He gestured for her to walk with him toward the barn. There's something else we need to discuss before the sheriff arrives. Once inside the cool dimness of the barn, Rider turned to face her, his expression uncharacteristically nervous. The sheriff suggested something I hadn't considered. Your father's men can keep coming after you as long as you're unattached. Genevieve frowned. Unattached, unmarried, Rider clarified, his cheeks coloring slightly. In the eyes of the law, an unmarried woman is still under her father's authority, no matter her age. But a wife is under her husband's authority instead, Genevieve finished, understanding dawning. You're suggesting I get married. To whom? The moment the question left her lips, she knew the answer. Her heart began to pound so loudly she was sure he must hear it. Rider ran a hand through his dark hair, clearly uncomfortable. It would be in name only, of course. A paper marriage for protection. You'd still have your freedom, your own room. I wouldn't expect, he broke off, seemingly unable to put into words what he wouldn't expect. You're proposing marriage, Genevieve said softly, needing to hear him say it directly. Rider met her eyes then, his gaze steady despite the flush still coloring his cheekbones. Yes, for your protection, nothing more. A strange mix of emotions washed through her: relief at the practical solution, disappointment that it was only practical, and something else she wasn't ready to name. It's a lot to ask, I know, Rider continued, mistaking her silence for hesitation. And if the idea is too distasteful, it's not distasteful, she interrupted quickly. It's unexpected. She took a breath, thinking through the implications. Would we have to pretend in front of others? Some appearances would need to be maintained, he admitted. But between us, nothing would change. You'd work as we agreed, save your money for your school. When the time comes that you want to leave, we could arrange a quiet divorce. The thought of leaving someday created an unexpected pang in her chest. And what about you? Wouldn't this prevent you from finding someone you truly wish to marry? Something flickered in his eyes too quickly for her to interpret. I'm not looking for that kind of marriage. Never have been. Before she could question this assertion, the sound of approaching riders drew their attention. Through the barn door, they could see Sheriff Davis and 2 deputies riding toward the house. We don't have to decide now, Ryder said quickly. Just think about it. Genevieve nodded, though in truth her decision was already made. The choice between a paper marriage to Rider Quinn and the risk of being forced back to her father and Prescott was no choice at all. Sheriff Davis proved to be a weathered man in his 50s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened carefully as Genevieve recounted her father's ultimatum, her disownment, and the subsequent pursuit. So you left of your own free will, the sheriff confirmed, making notes in a small book. And Mr. Quinn offered you employment and safe passage. That's correct, Genevieve affirmed. My father has no right to send men after me. I'm of legal age and sound mind. Davis nodded thoughtfully. Law's on your side there, Miss Owens, but your father's claiming Quinn coerced you, maybe even promised marriage to lure you away. Ryder, who had been silently observing from across the room, straightened at this. That's a damned lie. Course it is, Davis agreed mildly. But it complicates things. Bounty's still out there, and some men don't much care about the finer points of law when that much money's involved. He closed his notebook. I'll send telegrams to the authorities in Willow Creek, make it clear you're here voluntarily. That should help, but it won't stop everyone. After the sheriff and his men departed, promising to patrol the area more frequently in the coming weeks, an uneasy silence fell over the house. Ryder paced the sitting room while Genevieve watched from her seat near the fire. We should do it, she said finally. Get married. Ryder stopped pacing, turning to face her. You're certain it's not a small thing, even if it is just on paper? I'm certain. Genevieve stood, crossing the room to stand before him. It's the most practical solution, as you said. Something like disappointment flickered across his features, so briefly she might have imagined it. Practical, he echoed. Yes. When would we do it? She asked, suddenly nervous about the prospect despite her decisiveness. Davis could perform the ceremony before he leaves town tomorrow, Ryder suggested. The sooner it's official, the sooner you're legally protected. Genevieve nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. Tomorrow, then. That evening, after a quiet dinner with Henry and Martha, Genevieve retreated to the porch, needing space to process the monumental change her life was about to undergo. The stars were emerging in the darkening sky, countless pinpricks of light in the vastness above. The sound of boots on wooden boards announced Ryder's approach. He joined her at the railing, his presence solid and reassuring beside her. Second thoughts, he asked softly. Genevieve shook her head. No, just reflecting on how quickly life can change. A week ago, I was Genevieve Owens, daughter of Clayton Owens, with my future mapped out for me. Now I'm about to become Genevieve Quinn, wife in name only to a man I barely know, living on a ranch hundreds of miles from everything familiar. When you put it that way, it sounds rather overwhelming, Ryder observed with a gentle smile. It is, she admitted, but also liberating. For the first time in my life, I'm making my own choices. She turned to face him. That's worth whatever comes next. Ryder's expression softened as he studied her face in the moonlight. You're a remarkable woman, Genevieve, braver than most men I've known. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. I don't feel brave, just desperate. Bravery often looks like desperation from the inside, he said thoughtfully. It's only later, looking back, that we recognize it for what it was. They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching as more stars appeared above them. Finally, Ryder cleared his throat. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket. It's not much, but he held out his hand, revealing a simple gold band resting in his palm. It was my mother's. I'd like you to have it for tomorrow. Genevieve stared at the ring, unexpectedly moved by the gesture. Ryder, I couldn't possibly, please, he insisted. A proper wedding needs a ring, even if the marriage itself isn't conventional. His voice grew softer. Besides, my mother would have liked you. She valued courage above all else. With trembling fingers, Genevieve took the ring, holding it carefully as if it might shatter. Thank you, she whispered. I'll treasure it for as long as I wear it. Something unspoken passed between them, then a current of feeling neither was ready to acknowledge. Ryder broke the moment first, stepping back slightly. We should get some rest, he said, his voice a touch rougher than usual. Big day tomorrow. As he turned to go, Genevieve called after him. Ryder, he paused, looking back. I may not love you as a wife should, she said carefully. But I do care for you, I want you to know that. In the silver moonlight, she saw his expression soften into something almost tender. I care for you too, Genevieve, more than I expected to. With that, he disappeared into the house, leaving Genevieve alone with the stars and the small gold ring that represented both her protection and a new kind of captivity, though a chosen one this time. The following day dawned clear and crisp, with a hint of winter in the air. Genevieve stood before the small mirror in her room, trying to calm her racing heart as Martha helped her dress for the ceremony. The older woman had produced a dress of pale blue cotton, simple but pretty, and had arranged Genevieve's honey-brown hair in a becoming style with small white flowers tucked into the braids. There, Martha said, stepping back to admire her work. Not quite the bride I'm sure your mama always imagined, but lovely nonetheless. Genevieve gave a wry smile. My mother died when I was 12, but you're right, this isn't the wedding she would have envisioned for her only daughter. Martha's eyes softened with understanding. Life rarely follows the paths we expect, child. The question is whether we fight the new direction or embrace it. I'm trying to embrace it, Genevieve admitted. Though I never imagined my wedding day would be so unusual, a knock at the door interrupted them. Henry poked his head in, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile at the sight of Genevieve. Sheriff's here, and the boss is wearing his good shirt, quite a sight. Genevieve laughed despite her nerves. Then I suppose we shouldn't keep them waiting. The ceremony itself was brief and to the point. Sheriff Davis, standing before the fireplace in Ryder's sitting room, performed the civil service with efficient dignity. Henry and Martha served as witnesses, along with two of the ranch hands who'd been invited in for the occasion. Ryder, true to Henry's word, wore his best shirt, a crisp white cotton that contrasted with his sun-darkened skin. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he'd trimmed his beard for the occasion. Standing beside him, Genevieve was struck by how handsome he was when not covered in trail dust. Do you, Rider Jacob Quinn, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Davis intoned. I do, Ryder answered, his voice steady as he slipped his mother's ring onto Genevieve's finger. And do you, Genevieve Marie Owens, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Genevieve hesitated just briefly, the finality of the moment washing over her. I do, she said clearly, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. Then, by the authority vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Davis closed his small book with a snap. You may kiss your bride, Quinn. This part they hadn't discussed. Genevieve felt heat rise to her cheeks as Ryder looked down at her, a question in his eyes. Understanding the necessity of appearances, she gave a small nod. Ryder leaned down, his lips brushing hers in what was meant to be a chaste kiss. But the moment their lips touched, something unexpected happened. A jolt of feeling, like lightning striking earth, passed between them. What began as a perfunctory gesture deepened for the briefest moment before Ryder pulled away, his eyes wide with surprise that mirrored her own. Congratulations, Sheriff Davis said, oblivious to the charged moment that had just passed. I'll file the certificate in town today. Should put a stop to any legal claims your father might make, Mrs. Quinn. The new name startled Genevieve almost as much as the kiss had. Mrs. Quinn, a name her father hadn't chosen, couldn't erase. After the sheriff departed and Martha served a simple wedding meal, Henry raised his glass in a toast. To Mr. and Mrs. Quinn, may your partnership bring prosperity to you both and to this ranch. Partnership, Ryder echoed, meeting Genevieve's eyes across the table. That's what this is, after all. To partnership, she agreed, raising her own glass while trying to ignore the lingering sensation of his lips on hers. That evening, after their guests had gone, an awkward tension filled the house. The practical question neither had addressed now loomed large between them. Where would Genevieve sleep? "Your room is ready," Ryder finally said, breaking the silence as they stood in the sitting room. "I had Martha move some more of Annabelle's old clothes in there for you." Relief and something that felt strangely like disappointment mingled in Genevieve's chest. "Thank you. The accounts are in my office," he continued, "all business now. Whenever you're ready to start looking them over, no rush though, I'll begin tomorrow," she promised. "I should earn my keep." Ryder's expression softened. "You don't have to earn your place here, Genevieve. This is your home now for as long as you want it to be." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "Thank you," she said again, wishing she had better words to express her gratitude. As she turned to go, Ryder called after her, much as she had done to him the night before. "Genevieve," she paused, looking back at him. "That kiss," he began, then seemed to reconsider his words. "Sleep well, Mrs. Quinn." The tenderness with which he said her new name stayed with her as she prepared for bed, wondering what he had been about to say about their unexpected moment of connection. As she drifted toward sleep, Genevieve realized that while her marriage might exist only on paper, her feelings for Rider Quinn were becoming decidedly more substantial. Days slipped into weeks as autumn deepened toward winter. Genevieve fell into the rhythm of ranch life with surprising ease. Each morning, she rose before dawn to help Martha prepare breakfast for the hands. Then, while Ryder and the men worked with the horses or tended the fields, she tackled the chaotic state of his accounts. "You've been running this place on instinct and luck," she told him one evening, surrounded by ledgers spread across the kitchen table. "It's a wonder you haven't gone bankrupt." Ryder grinned, unrepentant. "Told you I needed help with the numbers." "Need help," she scoffed good-naturedly. "You need a miracle, but I think I've sorted it out now." She showed him the new system she'd created, tracking expenses against income, planning for future purchases, setting aside money for lean months. The pride in his eyes as he studied her work made her glow with satisfaction. "You're remarkable," he said, not for the first time. "What would I do without you?" "Fortunately, you won't have to find out," she replied lightly, ignoring the flutter in her stomach his praise always provoked. Their marriage of convenience had settled into a comfortable partnership with one unspoken rule. They never referenced the kiss they'd shared on their wedding day, nor the unexpected feelings it had stirred in both of them. By day, they worked side by side running the ranch. By night, they retreated to their separate rooms, maintaining the boundaries they'd agreed upon. News from Willow Creek arrived via Sheriff Davis in late November. Clayton Owens had withdrawn the bounty after receiving official notification of Genevieve's marriage. According to Davis, the older man had declared his daughter dead to him, once more upon learning she'd married Rider Quinn of all people. "Good riddance," was Ryder's only comment on the matter, though Genevieve caught him watching her closely, gauging her reaction to the final severing of ties with her family. "I mourned that loss the day I left," she assured him. "This changes nothing." With the threat of bounty hunters eliminated, life on the ranch grew more relaxed. Genevieve began venturing into Silver Creek with Martha for supplies, gradually meeting the townspeople who viewed her with curiosity and increasing warmth as she became a familiar face. It was on one such trip in early December that she first encountered resistance. They were in the general store when the bell above the door jangled, announcing the arrival of 3 well-dressed women who fell silent at the sight of Genevieve. "Mrs. Quinn," one of them finally said, her tone making the name sound like an insult. "How interesting to find you in town." Martha stiffened beside her, but Genevieve kept her voice pleasant. "Good afternoon, ladies. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Mrs. Hargrove," the woman said, her pinched expression making her look older than her probable 40 years. "This is Mrs. Elliott and Mrs. Porter. Our husbands own the bank, the hotel, and the largest cattle ranch in the county, respectively." The implication was clear: these were the social arbiters of Silver Creek, and they wanted Genevieve to know her place in the hierarchy. How fortunate for them to have such accomplished wives, Genevieve replied smoothly. My husband speaks highly of Mr. Porter's cattle operation. Mrs. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. Yes, your hasty marriage caused quite a stir. Some might wonder about the circumstances requiring such speed. The insinuation that she might have been with child when she married Ryder made Genevieve's cheeks burn, but she maintained her composure. The circumstances were indeed unusual. Being pursued by bounty hunters tends to accelerate one's plans. She smiled sweetly. But I assure you, Mrs. Hargrove, the only scandalous aspect of our marriage is how very happy it's made us both. Martha made a choking sound that might have been suppressed laughter. Mrs. Hargrove looked as if she'd bitten into something sour, while her companions exchanged glances. Well, Mrs. Elliot said finally, the Ladies' Aid Society meets on Thursdays at the church, should you wish to integrate yourself into our community. The olive branch, however begrudgingly extended, surprised Genevieve. Thank you, I'll consider it. After the women departed, Martha burst into genuine laughter. Lord above, girl, the look on Eliza Hargrove's face when you mentioned bounty hunters. I thought she might faint dead away. Was I too forward? Genevieve asked, suddenly concerned. I don't want to make things difficult for Ryder in town. Martha waved away her worry. Those old biddies needed taking down a peg. And don't you worry about making things difficult for that husband of yours. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. That man would move mountains if you asked him to. Genevieve felt her cheeks warm again, this time for a very different reason. We have an arrangement, Martha. It's not a real marriage. The older woman gave her a knowing look. Keep telling yourself that, dear, but I've been married 30 years and I know what love looks like, whether the people feeling it admit it or not. The conversation left Genevieve unsettled for the rest of the day. Was Martha right? Did Ryder look at her differently when she wasn't paying attention? And more troublingly, did she want him to? That evening, as a heavy snow began to fall, Genevieve sat by the fire in the sitting room, attempting to focus on a book while her thoughts continued to circle around Martha's words. Ryder entered, bringing a gust of cold air with him as he stamped snow from his boots. Storm's setting in, he announced, moving to warm his hands by the fire. Could be snowed in for a few days. Genevieve marked her place in the book. Is everything secured? Horses are in the barn, extra hay's been distributed, hands are all settled in the bunkhouse with plenty of supplies. He smiled down at her. Henry said you organized the winter storm preparations last week. It seemed prudent, she said with a small shrug. Growing up in Willow Creek, I learned to respect winter's power. You've become quite the rancher's wife, Ryder observed, his tone warm with approval. The men have noticed. They say the place runs smoother with you here. The praise made her glow inside. I'm glad to be useful. Ryder sat in the chair opposite hers, stretching his long legs toward the fire. You're far more than useful, Genevieve. This place, it's different with you in it. Better? The sincerity in his voice made her heart skip. It's different for me too, she admitted. Being here, having purpose, making my own decisions, it's everything I never knew I wanted. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the crackling fire and howling wind outside the only sounds. Finally, Genevieve gathered her courage to ask the question that had been lingering since her conversation with Martha. Ryder, are you content with our arrangement, our marriage as it is? His eyes, which had been half closed in relaxation, snapped fully open, focusing intently on her face. Are you? I asked first, she countered, needing to hear his thoughts before revealing her own increasingly confused feelings. Ryder considered his words carefully. When I proposed this arrangement, I meant what I said: no expectations, no demands. Your protection was my only concern. He paused, staring into the fire. But I'd be lying if I said my feelings haven't evolved. Genevieve's breath caught. Evolved how? He met her gaze directly then, his gray eyes reflecting the firelight. I find myself wanting more than a paper marriage, more than a practical partnership. His voice dropped lower. I find myself wanting you, Genevieve, not just as my business partner or friend, but as my wife in truth. The naked honesty in his confession sent heat flooding through her. Since when? She managed to ask. A rueful smile played at his lips. Since that damn kiss, if I'm honest, though maybe even before that. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But I need you to understand something. I won't press you. What we have now is good, and if that's all you want, it's enough for me." Genevieve's heart pounded as she stood, moving to kneel before his chair. "And if I told you I've been feeling the same way, that I lie awake at night, thinking about that kiss, wondering what it would be like if we were truly husband and wife." Ryder's eyes darkened as he reached out to touch her cheek, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Then I'd say we've both been fools, denying ourselves something we both want. I've never." She began, then blushed. "That is, I don't have experience in." "I know," he said softly. "And we can take all the time you need, days, weeks, months." But Genevieve, he took her hands in his. "I need to be clear about something else. This isn't just physical desire for me, I care for you deeply, more than I thought possible." The words she'd been afraid to acknowledge, even to herself, suddenly seemed the most natural thing in the world to say. "I love you, Rider Quinn. Not because you saved me or married me or gave me a home, but because of who you are, the man who sees me truly and values what he sees." Ryder's breath caught, his hands tightening around hers. "Say that again," he whispered. "I love you." In one fluid motion, he pulled her into his lap, his arms encircling her as his lips found hers. Unlike their wedding kiss, this one held nothing back. It was deep and passionate, filled with all the longing they'd both been suppressing. Genevieve wound her arms around his neck, responding with an enthusiasm that surprised even herself. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Ryder rested his forehead against hers. "I love you too," he murmured. "Have for a while now, but was too damn stubborn to admit it, even to myself." The happiness that bloomed in Genevieve's chest was unlike anything she'd ever experienced, pure and radiant, warming her from within. "So what happens now?" she asked, suddenly shy despite the passion they'd just shared. Ryder smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Now, Mrs. Quinn, we begin our marriage for real, if that's what you want." "It is," she assured him. "Very much so." As the snowstorm raged outside, transforming the landscape into a pristine white wonderland, Ryder and Genevieve Quinn discovered the true meaning of the vows they'd exchanged months before. In the warmth of their bedroom, now truly shared, they found in each other not just passion but partnership, not just desire but devotion. Later, as Genevieve lay in the circle of Ryder's arms, her head resting on his chest, she thought about the journey that had brought her here from a woman whose name had been erased to one who had found herself anew. "What are you thinking?" Ryder asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I was thinking about names," she said softly. "How my father struck mine from the family Bible, thinking he could erase me from existence." Ryder's arms tightened around her. "He failed." "Yes," she agreed. "Because you saw me when I was invisible." She propped herself up on an elbow to look into his face. "Do you remember what you said that first day, when I told you my family had erased my name?" A slow smile spread across Ryder's face. "I think I said something about your name meaning something again one day." "You did," she confirmed. "But there was more to it than that." She leaned down to kiss him softly. "The day we married, when the sheriff pronounced us husband and wife, you gave me more than protection. You gave me a new name, one my father can never take away." Understanding dawned in Ryder's eyes. "Genevieve Quinn," he said, the name like a caress on his lips. "A name I chose," she said fiercely. "A name I'm proud to bear." Ryder sat up, pulling her with him. "Wait here," he said, kissing her quickly before slipping from the bed. He returned moments later with something clutched in his hand. "I've been working on this for weeks," he admitted, looking almost bashful as he handed her a small wooden object. "Wasn't sure when or if I'd ever give it to you." It was a carved wooden heart, polished to a smooth shine, and etched carefully into its surface were their initials, RQ and GQ, surrounded by intricate scrollwork. "It's beautiful," Genevieve whispered, running her fingers over the carved letters. "Your family erased your name," Ryder said softly. "So I etched it beside mine where it belongs, where no one can ever erase it again." Tears sprang to Genevieve's eyes as the significance of the gesture washed over her. This man, who had saved her in more ways than one, understood exactly what had been taken from her and had found the perfect way to restore it. "I love you," she said again, the words coming easier now, feeling more natural with each repetition. "And I love you," Ryder replied, taking the wooden heart and placing it on the bedside table. Now and always, Genevieve Quinn. As they came together once more, the snowstorm outside sealing them in their private world, Genevieve knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not in a place, but in a person. In Rider Quinn's arms, in his heart, in the name they now shared, she had found where she belonged. The names etched side by side in wood were more than just letters. They were a promise, a declaration, a new beginning. Her family had erased her name, but Ryder had given her something far more precious, a name chosen in love to be carried with pride for all the days to come.